Officer, this is my backyard. If you cross the locked gate, you are trespassing.
We're in hot pursuit. You fit the description.
Hot pursuit means you were chasing someone. You're not out of breath.
I'm asserting my Fourth Amendment right.
Last warning.
On the ground or you're going to jail.
The shouting wasn't coming from a backyard movie night or kids playing cops and robbers. It was echoing across the privacy fence of a modest, well-kept home on Oakmont Street in a working-class neighborhood just outside the city. And the man being shouted at wasn't a criminal running from the law. He was standing beside his propane grill, holding a metal spatula, about to flip 4 burger patties that were just hitting that perfect sear. Before we dive into the details of this constitutional nightmare, I need you to understand something about the sanctity of a man's home. The law calls it curtilage, the area immediately surrounding your residence that enjoys the same Fourth Amendment protections as the inside of your house. But for Elijah Booker, it wasn't just a legal concept taught in law school. It was his hard-earned refuge. It was the slice of American soil he had bled for across 3 decades in hostile territories, and the place where he had every right to exist in peace without explanation, without suspicion, without fear. Elijah Booker was 58 years old, a retired Marine colonel, and currently a senior aerospace consultant working on satellite defense systems. He stood 6'1" with the ramrod straight bearing of a man who had commanded Marines in Fallujah and Kandahar. He was wearing a navy blue polo shirt tucked into pressed khaki slacks and brown leather loafers, his typical weekend uniform. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed. His yard was immaculate. He was the picture of a law-abiding American, enjoying a Saturday afternoon, and he was about to learn that none of that mattered to Officer Kevin O'Connell. Elijah Booker didn't become a colonel by accident. You don't rise to that rank in the Marine Corps without mastering 2 critical skills: discipline under pressure and an encyclopedic understanding of the rules that govern authority. During his 30 years of service, he'd commanded infantry battalions, overseen complex logistics operations in war zones, and taught constitutional law as part of the Corps' leadership development program. He could recite the Fourth Amendment in his sleep. He understood the difference between reasonable suspicion and probable cause better than most attorneys. He knew exactly where his rights ended and where government authority could legally begin. And he knew with absolute certainty that his fenced backyard was protected space that no officer could enter without a warrant, exigent circumstances, or his explicit consent. After retirement, Booker had channeled that same discipline into civilian life. He mentored at-risk youth at the Oakmont Community Center every Thursday evening, teaching them about respect, responsibility, and their constitutional rights. He volunteered with a veterans advocacy group that helped former service members navigate bureaucratic red tape. His neighbors knew him as the guy who shoveled elderly Mrs. Chen's driveway in winter and organized the annual block party every July. He'd never been arrested, never been sued, never even gotten a speeding ticket. His record was spotless because his character was solid. Kevin O'Connell, on the other hand, had been wearing a badge for exactly 9 months and 13 days. At 23 years old, he was living out a fantasy he'd cultivated since childhood, being the guy who takes down the bad guys. His academy instructors had praised his physical fitness and his enthusiasm, but several had quietly noted concerns about his judgment and his tendency to escalate rather than de-escalate situations. He'd been written up twice for overly aggressive traffic stops, but nothing that stuck. His training officer had described him as someone who sees every interaction as a test of authority rather than an opportunity for community service. O'Connell didn't see himself as aggressive. He saw himself as proactive, assertive, the kind of cop who didn't back down, the kind who made things happen. He'd spent the morning patrolling a neighborhood 2 miles from Oakmont Street when a call came through about a suspicious person reported near the elementary school. The description was vague: black male, average height, dark clothing. Most officers would have driven by, assessed the situation, and moved on when nothing materialized. Kevin O'Connell wasn't most officers. He was hunting. The latch on the side gate clicked open at exactly 2:47 p.m. Elijah Booker heard it immediately, that distinct metallic sound of someone entering his property uninvited. He turned from the grill, spatula still in hand, and saw the blue uniform emerging from the narrow pathway between his house and the fence. Then, he saw the gun. "Drop the weapon. Get on the ground now." Booker's military training kicked in instantly, but not in the way Officer O'Connell expected. Instead of panic, Booker felt an eerie calm wash over him, the same calm that had kept him alive during mortar attacks in Ramadi. His hands rose slowly, the spatula clearly visible in his right hand. Fingers spread on his left. "Officer, this is a grilling spatula," Booker said, his voice steady and measured. "I'm standing in my own backyard. You've entered my property without permission, without a warrant, and without legal justification. I'm going to need you to leave immediately." O'Connell's hand remained on his holstered weapon, his body language radiating aggressive tension. "I'm in pursuit of a suspicious person, reported in this area. I have reason to believe he may have entered this property." "What reason?" Booker asked, still holding his hands visible. "What specific, articulable facts led you to believe someone entered my fenced, private backyard? Because right now, you're violating my Fourth Amendment rights. This area is legally defined as curtilage. It has the same constitutional protections as the inside of my home." "Sir, I don't need a lecture. You entered without a warrant," Booker continued, his tone remaining respectful but firm. "You don't have probable cause. You don't have exigent circumstances. There's no immediate threat to life. No suspect fleeing from a violent felony. No evidence being actively destroyed. What you have is an illegal entry onto private property." O'Connell's jaw tightened. The body cam on his chest was recording every word, every gesture, every second of what was quickly becoming a constitutional crisis. "I have a right to pursue suspects. Not onto private property without meeting the legal threshold," Booker interrupted. "Hot pursuit requires that you were actively chasing someone and they fled into this space while you were in immediate pursuit. Were you chasing someone through my gate?" Silence. "Officer, I'm going to make this simple. I'm asking you 3 questions, and I'd like clear answers. 1. Do you have a warrant to be on this property?" "No, but..." 2. Can you articulate specific probable cause or exigent circumstances that legally justify your warrantless entry?" O'Connell's face flushed. "I told you, there was a report. A vague report about a suspicious person 2 miles away doesn't give you carte blanche to violate citizens' constitutional rights," Booker said. 3. Will you please leave my property now, or would you prefer I call your supervisor to explain why you're still here?" O'Connell's hand moved away from his weapon, but he didn't move toward the gate. Instead, he planted his feet wider, his posture shifting from defensive to defiant. "I'm not going anywhere until I've cleared this property." And that's when Elijah Booker knew this wasn't going to end well. Margaret Chen had been watering her tomato plants when she heard the shouting. At 72 years old, she'd taught 5th grade for 40 years. And she'd developed a finely tuned ear for when a situation was going sideways. The tone coming from Elijah's backyard wasn't playful. It wasn't friendly. She set down her watering can and moved toward the fence line, her arthritic fingers already pulling her phone from her cardigan pocket. Her daughter had taught her how to record video last Christmas, insisting that everyone needs to know how to document things these days, Mom. Margaret had thought it was paranoid at the time. Now she was grateful. She pressed record and held the phone up, angling it through a gap in the privacy fence. The image was partially obscured by wooden slats, but the audio was crystal clear. Elijah's voice calm, measured, asking about warrants and supervisors. The officer's voice aggressive, dismissive, talking over him. And then she saw movement. The officer wasn't leaving. He was moving deeper into Elijah's yard, gesturing toward the shed near the back corner. "He's not doing anything wrong," Margaret whispered to herself, her hand trembling slightly as she held the phone steady. "He's just grilling." 3 houses down, David and Jennifer Martinez were unloading groceries from their SUV when Jennifer paused, her head tilting toward the commotion. "Is that a cop yelling?" she asked her husband. David listened for a moment, then his eyes widened. "That's coming from the Booker's place." He pulled out his phone and opened the Ring app connected to their doorbell camera. The angle didn't capture Elijah's backyard directly, but it had a partial view of the side gate and the driveway. He tapped the record button and adjusted the camera remotely to maximize the coverage. Across the street, retired postal worker James Whitmore had his window open and heard every word. He didn't have a fancy doorbell camera, but he had something better, a decades-old distrust of authority and a brand-new smartphone. He positioned himself at his second-floor window and started recording, his view offering a clear sightline over the fence into Booker's backyard. 3 cameras, 3 angles, 3 witnesses who understood that what they were watching wasn't a police officer doing his job. It was a civil rights violation, unfolding in real time. O'Connell's eyes locked onto the wooden shed at the back corner of the property. It was a standard 8x10 structure with a simple latch lock, the kind you could buy at any home improvement store. To O'Connell, it represented possibility a place where his phantom suspect might be hiding, where he could justify this entire encounter, where he could prove he'd been right all along. "I need to check that shed," he announced, already moving toward it. Booker stepped laterally, not blocking the officer's path but making his position clear. "You do not have my consent to search any structure on this property. That shed is locked. It contains my personal belongings. You have no warrant, no probable cause, and no legal authority to enter it. If someone's hiding in there, no one is hiding in there," Booker said, his voice taking on an edge for the first time. "And even if someone were, you'd need either my consent or exigent circumstances that you clearly don't have. Officer, I'm telling you directly, you do not have permission to search that shed." O'Connell's face hardened. He'd been contradicted, corrected, and lectured by this man for the past 5 minutes, and his ego couldn't absorb another second of it. In his mind, he was the authority here. He was the one with the badge. And this civilian, regardless of his military service or his legal knowledge, was going to learn that lesson. "Step aside," O'Connell ordered. Booker didn't move. "I'm not interfering with you. I'm standing in my own yard, but I'm explicitly refusing consent for any search." What happened next would be captured on 3 civilian cameras and 1 police body cam. O'Connell walked directly to the shed, gripped the door handle, and when it didn't open, he stepped back and kicked it hard just below the lock. The wood splintered. The door flew open with a crack that echoed across the yard. Inside, a lawnmower, a leaf blower, a red gas can, a coiled garden hose, bags of mulch, an edger, exactly what you'd expect to find in a suburban shed. No suspect, no evidence, no justification. O'Connell stood there for 3 seconds, staring at the mundane contents, his breathing heavy, his career crumbling in real time. The body cam captured it, all the illegal search, the property damage, the complete absence of anything remotely criminal. Booker's voice cut through the silence. "Officer, you've just committed a 4th Amendment violation that's going to cost your department more money than that shed is worth." O'Connell turned around, and his eyes told the whole story. He knew he'd screwed up, and now he had to decide, admit it or double down. He chose to double down. O'Connell's hand went to his handcuffs, and Elijah Booker recognized the move before it happened. He'd seen it before, the moment when someone in authority realizes they're wrong, but their ego won't let them walk it back. The only path forward for men like O'Connell was to create a new narrative, one where they were still the hero, and everyone else became the villain. "Sir, turn around and put your hands behind your back," O'Connell said, his voice suddenly taking on an official tone, as if reading from a script he was making up as he went. "On what charge?" Booker asked, his hands still visible at his sides, spatula long since set down on the grill's side table. "Obstruction of justice and threatening a police officer." The words hung in the air like a bad joke. Booker felt a cold fury settle into his chest, not the hot, explosive kind, but the calculated anger of a man who'd just watched the system he'd served betray him in real time. "I haven't obstructed anything. I've asserted my constitutional rights, and I certainly haven't threatened you. You refused to comply with a lawful order." "You haven't given me a lawful order," Booker interrupted. "Every directive you've issued has been unconstitutional, and now you're compounding your violations by making a false arrest." O'Connell moved forward, reaching for Booker's wrist. "Turn around now, or I'll add resisting arrest to the charges." The back door of the house swung open. Dr. Naomi Booker stepped onto the deck, still wearing her reading glasses, a medical journal in her hand. She was a trauma surgeon at Metropolitan General, a woman who'd spent 25 years making life-and-death decisions under pressure. She took one look at the scene, her husband's raised hands, the uniformed officer with handcuffs out, the destroyed shed door, and immediately understood what was happening. "Officer, what is going on here?" Her voice was sharp, clinical, the same tone she used when a resident was about to make a critical error in the OR. "Ma'am, step back inside. That's my husband. This is our property, and unless you have a warrant, you need to leave immediately." She pulled out her phone and started recording, adding a fourth camera to the documentation. "I'm Dr. Naomi Booker, and I'm telling you right now, whatever you think you're doing, you're making a career-ending mistake." O'Connell's face flushed darker. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down and go back inside, or you'll be joining him." Naomi's eyebrows shot up. "Are you threatening to arrest me for standing on my own deck?" But O'Connell had already turned back to Elijah, snapping the handcuffs onto his wrists with more force than necessary. The patrol car smelled like stale coffee and industrial cleaner. Elijah Booker sat in the back seat, hands cuffed behind him, and said absolutely nothing. It was a strategy he'd taught to every Marine who'd ever served under his command. When you're in enemy territory and the situation is fluid, you shut your mouth and let the opposition make mistakes. O'Connell kept glancing in the rearview mirror, clearly unnerved by the silence. The body cam on his chest was still recording standard procedure during any arrest and transport. What O'Connell didn't fully grasp was that every word he said now was being preserved as evidence. "Look, you made this harder than it needed to be," O'Connell said, his voice carrying a defensive edge. "If you'd just let me do my job, check the property, we could have avoided all this." Silence from the back seat. O'Connell shifted in his seat. "I mean, I had a report of a suspicious person. I was following up on a legitimate call. That's reasonable suspicion right there." Booker stared straight ahead, his face expressionless. He'd learned decades ago that silence made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable people talked. And when people talked, they revealed things. And when you refuse to cooperate, that's obstruction. Clear as day. O'Connell's voice was slightly higher now, as if he were trying to convince himself as much as justify to his silent passenger. "Plus, you were holding that spatula in an aggressive manner when I first entered. I felt threatened." The story was evolving. The spatula was now aggressive. The vague report was now reasonable suspicion. Cooperation was being redefined as absolute submission. "You should have just answered my questions," O'Connell continued, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Made things simple, but you wanted to be difficult, wanted to play lawyer." Elijah Booker remained silent, but in his mind, he was counting every contradiction, cataloging every self-serving revision. The body cam was doing his work for him. By the time they reached the precinct, O'Connell had told 3 different versions of the same story. The cameras had recorded all of them. Sergeant Luis Rodriguez had been working the booking desk for 11 years. He'd processed thousands of arrests, drunks, shoplifters, domestic disputes, the occasional violent felon. He had a routine. Take the arresting officer's report, process the paperwork, get the suspect fingerprinted and photographed, and move on to the next one. It was assembly line justice. And Rodriguez had long ago learned not to get emotionally invested in any individual case. But when Officer O'Connell walked through the door with a handcuffed man in khakis and a polo shirt, Rodriguez felt something shift in his gut. He knew that face. "Elijah?" Rodriguez said, his pen hovering over the intake form. "Colonel? Booker?" Booker met his eyes and gave a slight nod. "Sergeant Rodriguez." They'd met at a community policing event 6 months earlier. Rodriguez had brought his teenage son to hear Booker speak about leadership and service at the Oakmont Community Center. His son, Miguel, had been struggling with direction, getting mixed up with the wrong crowd. Booker had spent an extra 45 minutes after the event talking with Miguel, sharing stories, offering mentorship. The kid had turned around after that joined ROTC, got his grades up, started talking about serving his country. Rodriguez looked down at O'Connell's arrest report and felt his stomach drop further. Obstruction of justice. Threatening an officer. He read the narrative vague descriptions of aggressive behavior and refusing lawful orders and suspicious circumstances. Officer O'Connell, Rodriguez said slowly, setting down his pen. Walk me through what happened here. O'Connell launched into his rehearsed version, the one he'd refined during the drive. But as he talked, Rodriguez's expression darkened. He'd been a cop long enough to recognize when a story didn't add up, when an officer was trying too hard to justify his actions. You entered his backyard without a warrant? Rodriguez asked. I had reasonable suspicion. Of what, specifically? Rodriguez's tone had shifted from routine to investigative. What did Colonel Booker do that gave you reasonable suspicion? O'Connell hesitated. There was a report. A report of what? From where? Rodriguez was no longer processing the arrest. He was interrogating the officer. He looked at Booker, still standing calmly in handcuffs. Colonel, did you threaten this officer? No, Sergeant. I asserted my Fourth Amendment rights and refused consent to search my property. Rodriguez closed the folder and reached for his desk phone. O'Connell, don't move. I'm calling Lieutenant Ramirez right now. The rookie's face went pale. That's not, I mean. This is standard. Nothing about this is standard, Rodriguez said, already dialing. And you're about to find out why. Lieutenant Maria Ramirez arrived at the booking desk within 6 minutes of Rodriguez's call. She'd been in her office finishing reports when she heard the words Colonel Booker and unlawful arrest in the same sentence, and something in Rodriguez's voice told her this wasn't going to be a minor paperwork issue. Captain Dennis Williams was right behind her. He'd served in the Army Reserve and knew Booker by reputation, the kind of officer whose name carried weight in military circles. Seeing him in handcuffs in their precinct lobby was jarring enough. Hearing the circumstances from Rodriguez was worse. Get those cuffs off him, Ramirez ordered O'Connell. Now, Lieutenant. He was obstructing. I said now, officer. O'Connell fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking slightly as he removed the handcuffs. Booker rubbed his wrists but said nothing, his expression unreadable. Conference room. All of us, Captain Williams said. It wasn't a request. 10 minutes later, they sat around a laptop in the departmental conference room. O'Connell's Bodycam footage was pulled up first. Williams hit play, and they watched in silence as the illegal entry unfolded. The audio was damning. Booker's calm, legally precise objections contrasted against O'Connell's escalating aggression. Then came the shed, the kick, the splintering wood, the complete absence of any suspect. Jesus Christ, Ramirez muttered. Williams pulled up the second-angle Mrs. Chen's phone footage, which her daughter had already emailed to the department after calling the precinct. It showed O'Connell's body language, the aggressive stance, the hand movements. Then came James Whitmore's footage from across the street, offering a clear overview of the entire backyard. The spatula was visible in every frame, clearly a grilling tool, not a weapon. Finally, the Ring camera footage from the Martinez residence, time-stamped and geotagged, showing O'Connell entering the side gate, without hesitation, without backup, without cause. Captain Williams stopped the playback and turned to O'Connell. The rookie looked like he might be sick. You entered private property without a warrant, without probable cause, and without exigent circumstances, Williams said, his voice flat and final. You conducted an illegal search. You damaged private property. You made a false arrest. And you did all of this to a decorated Marine colonel who was committing no crime whatsoever. Sir, I thought. I don't care what you thought. I care what you did. Williams held out his hand. Badge and gun. Right now. O'Connell's face crumbled. Captain, please. You're suspended pending termination. Internal Affairs will be in touch. And, Officer O'Connell, Williams leaned forward. Get yourself a lawyer. Because Colonel Booker is going to need someone to sue. The lawsuit was filed within 48 hours. Elijah Booker's attorney, a civil rights specialist named Patricia Diaz, who'd built her career on Fourth Amendment violations, described it as one of the most clear-cut cases of unconstitutional policing I've ever seen. The multiple camera angles made it airtight. The Bodycam footage made it indefensible, and O'Connell's evolving narrative during the car ride made it a prosecutor's dream. The city's legal team took one look at the evidence and knew they couldn't win at trial. A jury would see a decorated veteran grilling in his own backyard. A rookie cop violating every constitutional protection meant to keep government power in check, and a system that had allowed someone with 9 months of experience to operate with virtually no oversight. The optics were devastating. The legal exposure was catastrophic. 6 months later, the city settled for $755,000, the largest civil rights settlement in the city's history. The mayor held a press conference. The police chief promised reforms. Officer Kevin O'Connell was officially terminated and would never wear a badge again. But the story didn't end there. The Department of Justice opened a pattern and practice investigation into the police department, examining training protocols, use of force policies, and accountability mechanisms. What they found was systemic. Inadequate constitutional law training, minimal de-escalation instruction, and a culture that rewarded proactive policing without defining what that actually meant within legal boundaries. The consent decree that followed mandated sweeping changes. Every officer would undergo 40 hours of constitutional law training annually. De-escalation would become a core competency, not an afterthought. Body cameras would be mandatory, and footage would be automatically flagged for review when certain keywords were spoken. Words like, "I don't consent," and "show me your warrant." But Elijah Booker's real victory came 3 months after the settlement check cleared. He stood at a podium in the Oakmont Community Center, the same place where he'd mentored Miguel Rodriguez, and announced the creation of the Constitutional Defense Fund. He was donating $500,000 of his settlement to establish a legal defense organization that would provide free representation to citizens whose civil rights had been violated by law enforcement. "I had knowledge," Booker told the assembled crowd, his voice steady. "I had resources. I had witnesses and cameras. Most people don't have any of that, and that's why they never get justice." He paused, looking out at the faces in the audience, people who'd lived their entire lives one bad traffic stop away from disaster. This fund ensures that the next person violated in their own backyard won't face the system alone. The applause lasted 3 minutes.